Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
you gotta be confident about your Achilles when you show up.
Yeah, I mean, I got an Achilles.
Chris Dowhouse,
Hearing about Mr. Pointless fantasy
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
I know you're thinking to yourselves, what operation twice in the same week? Yes, that's right. That's exactly what we're going to be doing from now on Thursday nights, because we have injuries we got to talk. We're always looking for. There we go. I'm blowing up my microphone, getting so excited about being on twice this week. Jeez Louise. Yeah, injuries. We got to talk about that. We're always talking about where can we find the edges as fantasy football players. This is where you can find the edges, making sure you get more accurate predictions when it comes to injuries. That's what this episode is going to be all about. Now, as always, I'm your host, Dan Mater, and I have a long-lost co-host for joining the show, Danielle Dubois. You're back.
I know, I'm back. It's been too long.
Has been way too long. So happy to have you on. I'm happy that we're going to be having you hopefully on most Thursdays. I know you're a busy person, but most Thursdays we'll be having Danielle on to help us break down some of this injury fantasy analysis. Make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast app, Operation Domination Football, available to you wherever you listen to your podcast. And of course, subscribing to the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel. You can watch us live, comment into the show. We'll try to get to you as we move along. But with no further ado, we need to introduce our very special guest. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. He's the number one injury medical expert in all of fantasy sports. The one, the only, Mr. Brian Scott.
Every time Dan gets me.
Love it. If you guys didn't know, you should have known. You should have came out to Canton, Ohio for the Expo. That's number one. And then Brian was one of the lead guys, medical panel experts, giving out great, because what happened that day, actually, the Marquise Brown news, which we're going to talk about a little bit today, literally happened that day while you're on the panel, on the fly with great analysis, pretty much nailed that prediction. So we're getting into all of that. But first things first, we got to talk a little quarterback time, because we have somebody who doesn't know what kind of injury he has. Brian, Justin Herbert denies that it's a plantar fasciitis issue. What would you think it is?
Who the freak knows? You can't ask John Harbaugh, though.
That's medical analysis there.
All right, moving on. I'll tell you who doesn't know for sure is John Harbaugh, because when asked, he humorously was quoted as saying, I'm not qualified to answer that question. And he didn't answer any question at all about his injury, which left everybody kind of like scratching their heads. Maybe it was plantar fasciitis. Maybe it wasn't. Whatever it was, it seems to have started nagging him in the offseason as they headed into preseason, because he didn't suit up for like 2 weeks. They had him in a boot, apparently, which kind of makes sense if he had like an acute exacerbation of some chronic underlying plantar fasciitis. I mean, that's possible. Sometimes to get that to go away quickly, you will put somebody in a boot for a couple weeks and hope that it calms down. Have them do some therapy in the meantime, keep them off the field, because what you don't want is this to become a lingering issue that carries on into the season, because we have seen some players deal with this throughout the year, and then as the season progresses and we get closer to the end, if they're not in contention anymore, they will then sit out for a period of time heading into the offseason at the tail end of the season. So it sounds like it probably was some plantar fasciitis. It sounds like he's gotten over it. He's been quoted it, and the team has been quoted as saying he's 100% ready to go. I've got no reason to think otherwise, so we will have to see how this plays out. Keep in mind, though, plantar fasciitis can rear its ugly head very easily, once again, if he's not fully recovered. So if he isn't, and they're throwing him back out there, that could be a big mistake. That could come back to bite them later. So we'll have to keep a close eye on how he does the first few weeks out of the gate here.
Yeah. First, I call BS, and they're lying. It's definitely plantar fasciitis. Second of all, quarterbacks and foot issues. Not a big fan of it. Didn't go over very well last year when it came to be the case.
Yeah.
So, Danielle, I haven't been able to talk to you all summer because you've been too busy actually being a professional on this podcast. But with Justin Herbert, this injury news, and the new coaching scheme in general, what's your outlook for looking for Justin Herbert? How much on your fantasy radar is he?
I would say he was a lot higher before all the injury talk came up, obviously. I think I was overall very high on him, and I have a very optimistic outlook on the Chargers offense this season, especially because we know what Justin Herbert can do. We've seen what he's capable of. So bringing in a little bit of a new scheme, a little bit more, I feel like, dynamic of an offense is what it's going to be this season. So with the injury, it gives me a little bit of hesitation. I had some of my drafts earlier this week, and I had the opportunity to grab him in some of my leagues, and I didn't just because, like you said, foot issues and quarterbacks, they don't mesh well together. And if that's what this is, and it's going to be a long-term kind of thing, I don't really want to mess with it and try figuring out a quarterback later on down the line.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And this is Justin Herbert's been the classic push-pull between, do you want more volume? Do you want more efficiency? I think the offense has a chance to be more efficient than what we've seen in the past that Herbert's had to run under Joe Lombardi, which was simply shotgun 5 wide, drop back, dink and dunk the whole time. But it's also going to miss the volume, and they're also missing some of the weapons. So Herbert's been somebody who's consistently been a low-end QB2 for me. And I think we're echoing the same sentiment there. That's it for the quarterbacks. It's only week 1, thankfully. Running backs, we do have somebody who's kind of interesting because, his teammate was already going to be out for the year. So now we have Packers running back Marshawn Lloyd dealing with the hamstring. And to my knowledge, even though he's listed as questionable, hasn't yet practiced this week. Brian, what do you got on that?
Yeah. So originally they were saying that it was a grade 1 hamstring strain that he suffered in the first preseason game. And, whenever I hear that terminology thrown around, it raises a red flag because it's pretty rare to get just a grade 1 hamstring injury. I mean, that is like, I don't know what to compare it to, but it's really not very common. Let's put it that way. Usually when guys are tweaking their hamstrings to a degree where they're actually having to sit out and miss time, it's not because of a simple little grade 1. Now, if it was just a little cramping in the hamstring where they were playing it cautiously, then I could understand. But my guess is that it was probably more of like a grade 2, because usually when hamstrings go, they don't just minor go. They go, and it's usually significant enough where guys are not willing to push through it out of fear that they might make it worse, or because they truly are having pain. A lot of times they'll get spasms of the cramp after the injury. So the team's been saying that he's ready to go, but like you said, Dan, he just returned to practice I think a couple days ago, maybe even today, actually. So he hasn't had much time to get ready. So this is very speculative. I think if he does play, he might only be sparingly used, depending on who else they can bring in to fill in the gaps, because there's no way he's going to be able to test this out in a game-like situation before game time.
Well, here's the funny part, and especially as a medical expert, I think you'll get a chuckle out of this. Right now, Josh Jacobs, of all people, is the only healthy running back on the Packers backfield at the moment. And on that note, Danielle, one of the big things about Josh Jacobs, right, was he had the huge year 2 years ago. Last year, absolutely stunk. There were other things going on to give that context. Wasn't happy with his situation, wasn't happy with his contract. How motivated was he to really play all that hard, be in shape and everything like that? So now it kind of leaves in the fantasy industry in this topsy-turvy seesaw battle of, okay, is he what he was 2 years ago, or is it what he was last year? And we were worried because of Matt LaFleur's, history of using 2 running backs that maybe Jacobs wouldn't get all the volume. If he doesn't get all the volume, he's not particularly that explosive. But now A.J. Dillon gone for the year. Marshawn Lloyd, kind of a weird looking hamstring injury as Brian laid out for you. Does this change your mind on Josh Jacobs' ceiling this year?
I'm willing to take a gamble on him this year. Like you said, he has been very up and down between the past 2 seasons, and I've had him both of those seasons. So I've endured the highs and lows with him, and I saw him earlier this week in one of my drafts, and I said, I'm going to take a chance again, and I'm feeling very confident in it because of what his usage seems like it will be in this offense. So overall, I'm pretty high on him. I'm willing to take the risk on a guy like him because we know what his ceiling is and we know what he is capable of. And it's gonna seem like it's possible this season if he's the go-to guy, which at this point he is.
Yeah, and just for context, I mean, I have an RB9 for this week. I have an article coming out tomorrow morning where I lay out he's one of my favorite parlay bets of the week because they have him down for 2.5 receptions and 16.5 receiving yards. And Marshawn Lloyd's not going to be there to take third down work. So I'm all over that on top of it.
Dan, I think if you see Marshawn Lloyd, I think it's only going to be for spot situations where Jacobs needs a rest, maybe for blocking purposes. I don't think you're going to see much in the way of him getting the ball on a handoff to go any type of distance, to be honest, because that's just going to risk setting him back and possibly re-injuring that hamstring if he's not 100%.
Yeah, so looking good for Josh Jacobs. Let's move to wide receivers. Now, this one has to take a little bit of a sour note, unfortunately, but I felt like we had to talk about it here. Ricky Pearsall shot through the chest. I mean, how nothing major happened to him is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. I think John Lynch used, miraculous, when in his interview like 3 different times when talking about this. And it is miraculous that ultimately he is okay. But now that he is ultimately okay, I feel like we can talk about this from a fantasy standpoint. And I mean, I don't know how much medical background you have with this kind of a thing, but what do you make of the situation?
Unfortunately, in the world of orthopedics, we do often treat gunshot wounds and people who have been shot. And it's never good. Let's just put it that way. So the fact that he escaped serious injury, especially if he was shot anywhere in the chest cavity or thorax for that matter, is miraculous, as the head coach said. My guess is from seeing the video of him hobbling into the ambulance, which was floating around social media, is that he may have gotten it more off of the side of the chest wall, maybe the rib, or to the flank, which would be ideal. I mean, if you guys or anybody out there knows about hunting or using guns, center mass is where you want to aim because that's where all the vital organs are. And so the fact that he got shot somewhere in the chest and didn't hit any vital organs is purely a blessing and pure luck. Maybe somebody was watching over him. Maybe it wasn't his time. But I ain't going back to San Francisco anytime soon. If random dudes are running up to NFL players on the street trying to mug them, that's a pretty scary situation there. Glad to see he's going to be okay. As far as when he'll be back, it's hard to say. He's been placed on non-football PUP IR, which means he's out 4 weeks. Unlike football PUP IR, where you're 4 games out, I believe the non-football IR is 4 weeks, which is different. It's not games per se. So that maybe changes the timeline a little bit, but it's anyone's guess as far as when he's going to come back. But I will tell you, anything in the thorax midsection area takes a long time to recover. It just hurts a lot. There's a lot of pain associated with it. Everything we do centers around our core, so it's going to be a tough recovery, but he should be able to make a full recovery.
Do you think he'll be back this season?
I do think he can make it back this season. Again, assuming nothing important was struck, he didn't have to undergo any major surgeries or anything like that, which by all reports I've seen, that is the case. So yeah, I do think he can make it back this year.
Okay. Well, we're not going to get too much in the fantasy part of that anyway, but I wanted to cover that to see what that was looking like. Let's dive right away into Jaylen Waddle. And this has been weird. Like Waddle missed a few weeks of camp. They have never disclosed what the injury. I still don't know. I'm hoping you maybe dug up something somewhere. I have no idea. All I can say is that now it does look like he's going to play this week. So I don't know. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah. Again, I don't know what it was. Possibly maybe a soft tissue injury that he incurred during off-season training or something. Don't know for sure. He did have an ankle issue a couple of years ago. I think had off-season surgery for that. Maybe it was something with that. It's hard to say. By all accounts, though, he's doing well. He's expected to be ready to go. And a lot of the staff are saying that he could potentially have a breakout year this year. So we'll have to see.
Well, to that note, that's why I want to go to Danielle with this, because last year, the whole problem with Waddle last year is he got hurt every single game. And every time he got hurt, I thought he was going to be out for the game and he came back in, but still it limited his production throughout the year. So him being already injured going into week 1, does that simmer you down on Jaylen Waddle at all? Or are you like, look, this Jaylen Waddle, he's due for a bounce back. It's Miami's offense and you're good to go.
It might simmer me down like a little bit, but ultimately it is Jaylen Waddle. And if you have the opportunity to draft him, I feel like you can't really pass it up. I personally didn't go for him this year, but I really can't see it. I don't wanna say that because I don't wanna be proven wrong, but I think overall it's a very good gamble because we love I mean, I personally love Waddle, and like you said, he is due for a breakout year, so I feel very confident in him this season and, kinda upping those numbers a little bit from last year.
I like it. I like it. Okay, so Marquise Brown, speak of the devil, what's your update on this, Brian? Because you were right there when it first happened.
I was, and we nailed it, Dan. I don't think he was going to be ready for week 1. He's not. We were saying, or I was saying, at least probably a month, similar to what Tyreek Hill had to deal with when he had this similar injury. So it sounds like he's not ready to go. He's already been listed as not participating in practice. He's going to end up not playing week 1. Obviously, we're about ready to kick off here. So I think it's going to be possibly another week or two. But as we get closer to that 1 month mark, that's when I would expect things to kind of ramp up as far as his activity and him getting back on the field. So pay close attention as the next couple weeks come back.
So it could be soon. It could be soon. That's the interesting thing. Danielle, I love that I haven't been able to talk to you all summer because I have no idea what your take's going to be. So this is going to be fantastic. So Marquise Brown gets hurt early on, and injuries has always been part of his MO. If it's not his shoulder, it's his hamstring, it's his calf, it's whatever. You got Xavier Worthy coming in, who looks like he could be, I don't know, the poor man version of Tyreek Hill, let's say. Because I don't think he's quite on that level, but he was drafted to essentially fill that type of a role. But rookies don't have a great track record, typically speaking, with Andy Reid performing. So what do you make of that situation with Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown? Because somebody's going to hit with Patrick Mahomes.
Yes, I think Worthy is going to have overall a very good breakout season. I mean, like you said, he doesn't Andy Reid and rookies kind of clash, it seems like. So I wouldn't say I would expect Tyreek Hill numbers from this man, but I think it's overall going to be a very good starting place. And while I'm not necessarily looking at him for fantasy wise this season, I think going forward, I'm going to keep an eye on him because easily next season, if this is a good year for him, I would definitely recommend drafting him next year. I love him already, and I haven't even seen him play a snap in the NFL, so I'm so excited to see him develop.
So is that you saying that Marquise Brown greater than Xavier Worthy for this season?
For this season, yes. But at least in my eyes, but I think as soon as it comes 2025, it's all going to switch.
I tend to agree. All right, so Josh Downs, it's not looking good for him dealing with that ankle injury, and he's been out for a while. So, Brian, what do you make of this?
Yeah, he's been out almost 4 weeks, but it's not surprising because they said it's a high ankle sprain. They called it mild. Again, this is one of those things. There's no such thing as a mild high ankle sprain. Like when you have a high ankle sprain, that's a tremendous amount of force. There's different ligaments involved. Those take a long time to recover. Most of the time, they're at least a moderate degree. So I wasn't buying that from the very beginning. So no surprise, we're about a month out from his injury, and he's not ready to go. I think he's going to need at least a few more weeks. He hasn't even practiced as far as I know. So we'll have to see how that kind of goes leading into next week here.
I mean, obviously we knew Michael Pittman was going to be getting number 1 targets anyway. That was never really a question. I think this actually did a huge favor for fantasy owners. And Danielle, I'd love to get your take on this because people were pumping up Josh Downs. Like, oh, Josh Downs, he was so good last year. He was fun to watch. And it was all blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Here's the thing. Josh Downs had a nice little stretch at the end of the year, but with Anthony Richardson, and it wasn't a big sample size, but with Anthony Richardson, you're talking about a wide receiver 76. Why? Because Anthony Richardson can't make more than one read. So I think this actually did a huge favor for fantasy owners. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I personally tend to agree because as we know in the fantasy world, as soon as a player has one good season, everybody rushes to him the next year and says, it's all going to happen again. He's clearly going to be my savior of my team. And I just don't see that being the case to begin with here. So I think, honestly, I feel like that's going to humble a lot of people. And that's kind of helping out. I feel like a lot of fantasy users that have that mindset. So automatically, I feel like that was a blessing. But also for Pittman, automatically, he was going to be the number 1 guy. But it does allow a little bit more concentration between Richardson and him.
Absolutely. Brian, it wouldn't be an injury inquiry episode if Mike Williams was not a name on our lists for, I don't know, ever. Yeah. So go ahead. Talk about Mike Williams.
So, he's coming off an ACL, was activated off PUP and has been practicing for a few weeks now. But keep in mind, he only played 3 games last year. So it's really going back to 2022 where he had any significant football game time. 3 weeks into the last season, it's not much time. So, he's cleared. He's doing his thing. The Jets have said they're going to take him along slow. They're already putting a snap count on him heading into week 1. And I think that's probably the wise thing to do. He's 30 years old, and statistics will show that at that position, at that age, coming off of an ACL injury, the first season back, guys do struggle significantly, and their production does drop off. So we will see, in all likelihood, when he steps back on the field, a significant dip in his production.
So, Daniel, here's the thing. So, depending on the size of your league, you either drafted Mike Williams like really, really late as a sleeper, or he's still hanging out on your waiver wire. And here's the other thing. Assuming Aaron Rodgers plays more than 4 plays this year, there should be a second receiver who's fantasy relevant. There's always has been. And usually a second receiver is a touchdown maker. That's the whole reason Alan Lazard even has a career, because he had 10 touchdowns with Aaron Rodgers. And we're dealing with guys who like Xavier Gibson, who were late round rookie picks, like talked about and hyped about. So when you look at Mike Williams, like, well, he's more talented than those guys. Even if, Brian's right and he's 70% of himself, still more talented than those guys. So is he on your radar because of Aaron Rodgers? Or you're like, look, he's dealing with a knee. He's always hurt. We don't know what Rodgers has. We don't know what this offense has outside of Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. And I'm not going to bother wasting my time even looking at him as a sleeper. Which way do you fall?
As a Patriots fan, I don't know if this is really like making my decision or not, but ultimately I'm steering clear of him. I also have had a history of just being burned by every time I've picked up Mike Williams, so maybe I just have a little bit of bad blood for both of those reasons. But personally, I'm avoiding it. I'm looking towards the other players on this team at this moment, just because in my mind, worst case scenario, and I not feeling the most confident in Williams. So kind of looking at anybody else / anybody else not on the Jets.
Oh, that would be better if I could actually have my volume up.
Our pets' heads are falling off.
Yeah, that's how Danielle feels with the Jets. All right. So with that, we have Brandon Cooks, who's dealing with a little bit of a knee issue. So Brian, what do you have on this?
It doesn't sound like it's serious. Apparently, he came into camp and has been having some knee soreness for the past couple of weeks, along with some other personal issues, whatever that might be. But he was actually removed from the injury reports today and is said to be a full go for game time this weekend. So,
he's an old man. He needs to take it easy, because my number one sleeper is Jaylen Tolbert, and I kind of need Brandon Cooks to get the hell out of my way so that can come to fruition. Look, and Daniel, you could tell me if I'm crazy if you want to. Now, I've been on Tolbert from a dynasty standpoint for 2 years now. I've been waiting for this moment, this exact moment where he finally grabs hold of the wide receiver 3 position. His skill set reminds me a lot of Michael Gallup, which is why I can see it really working out on the Dallas Cowboys, because he is that perimeter wide receiver who can track the ball well down deep. He's not necessarily a big yards after catch guy. He's not necessarily a huge route runner, but there's a certain role he can play on the other side of CeeDee Lamb. And Brandon Cooks hasn't had more than 700 yards in 2 years now. Looks like he's getting older, had trouble separating last season. Now he's dealing with the knee soreness and personal issues and everything else going on. And I'm looking at Dallas. They have Rico Dowdle, Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott. They ain't running the football. I know that. So they're throwing the ball 600 times this year. So what do you think about my Jaylen Tolbert sleeper of the year?
I honestly don't hate it. I don't know if we're both crazy or what, but I honestly like it. It's kind of time for him to have his breakout season, it feels like. And so with him moving into that wide receiver 3 spot, like you said, it's not insane, especially like you said, the running back room is just wow. That's all I can say there. They brought back Ezekiel Elliott, and that's the most hope that they have for running it. So when it comes to throwing the ball, I feel like Dak Prescott is going to need to look at his options very clearly, and hopefully Jaylen will be one of those go-to guys now. So I don't think it's too far off.
All right. See, I like that. Danielle is in my corner. I like it. I like when Danielle's in my corner when it comes to that kind of stuff. By the way, I need a meme with a bunch of old people and walkers every time I talk about the Dallas Cowboys backfield. I need that going across the screen when that gets brought up. All right. So last but not least, and our only tight end that we're going to talk about, because we took some other guys off because they're practicing full and going to be fine. But we do have Brock Bowers, the big number one rookie, long anticipated. As a dynasty player, and you guys know this as dynasty players, we've been waiting for Brock Bowers to come to the NFL for a minute now. Like, we're waiting it. So now he's finally there, and he's dealing with a foot issue. Brian, what's going on?
Whenever you hear about foot issues in NFL players, you always get concerned about the dreaded Liz Frank. It doesn't sound like that was what happened here. He got injured in preseason week 1 game, and Antonio Pierce said that, being a rookie and everything, we just sat him out as a precautionary measure, not to make him hurt himself, essentially, by practicing through something he probably shouldn't have. So they're saying he's going to be ready to go. Doesn't sound like it's anything serious. He was quoted as saying that he would have been ready to play a couple weeks ago if needed. So it doesn't sound like it's anything to worry about. Good news all around there.
Get on the field. I spent 3 first-rounders trading up to go get you. Get your butt on the field.
Sure he will.
No, it's just all that culmination of, like, I've been waiting for this.
I know.
But from a redraft perspective, because everyone's really, mostly in redraft mode right now, I do have Brock Bowers, and I had to fight this. I do have him as my tight end 12 coming into the season, my draft rankings. And this week I have him further down because of the injuries and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm just looking at, I know rookie tight ends typically do not do well. And I know that we can't go off of last year, which was fantastic from the Sam Laporta perspective and all of that. We can't get carried away. And I typically do not when it comes to tight ends. I actually am very anti-rookie tight end, normally speaking. But Brock Bowers, he's not a tight end. He's a weapon. He's a weapon. Here's the problem. Luke Getsy's his offensive coordinator. Gardner Minshew's his quarterback. That's the issue. So, Danielle, where did you have Brock Bowers coming into the season?
I honestly haven't looked at all the tight ends to rank him, but he's very high on mine just because I'm a Georgia girl. I've loved watching him all these past few years. So, I too have been waiting for him to enter the NFL because I am just obsessed with this man and how well he can play football. It's insane. Overall, love him. Amazing talent. But like you said, Gardner Minshew being his quarterback is the biggest concern for me. So I'm not too optimistic, but I think if anybody can make a connection with Minshew, I feel like it's him.
I mean, he should be the safety blanket, if nothing else. It's not like Zamir White catches the ball out of the backfield all that well. And Jacoby Myers, Jacoby Myers is Jacoby Myers. Like, it's going to go to Devontae Adams. And then my hope is Brock Bowers can establish himself as that check down weapon. It just sucks because, even if they pull the hook on Gardner, it's Aiden O'Connell. Okay, cool. The one quarterback who's not any better whatsoever. But that's going to do it for our show here today. Thanks for all joining in. Again, Thursday nights, baby, we're going to be back with these injury reports, giving you guys the edge. So make sure you're tuning in to the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel and checking out Operation Domination Football on your favorite podcast app. Before we get out of here, Brian, what do you got going on, man?
What don't we got going on now that football started? I'm pretty much all over the place each week here with all these updates and whatnot, plus doing my own podcast, which you can find on your favorite podcast platform. And in fact, this week I just released an episode earlier today, actually, where I interviewed Dr. Michael Hutchison, a dentist out of Michigan who has invented a revolutionary mouth guard called NeuroGuard Plus. I encourage everybody to take a listen. You can find that on my social media or on wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter at Injured List Pod, on Instagram, The Injured List Podcast, Facebook, The Injured List Podcast, and the website, theinjuredlist.com. And I'm doing bunch of projects like that as far as the podcast goes. And then obviously with you, Dan, every Thursday, like we've been doing for the last couple of years, injury updates with you and Danielle. And then TSS Fantasy at That Sports Podcast Network on Fridays and Sunday early mornings, right before the games get going with last minute updates. You can find me there too.
Very nice. Danielle, you're all over. So what do you, because you're literally all over. So where are we need to check out what your stuff's coming out of? Because it's been fantastic.
You can follow me on X now, not Twitter, at Danielle Dubois, and on Instagram at Danielle_Dub. And then if you want to hear more of my voice, I don't know if you want to or not, but you can check out Round the Rink on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Big hockey girl, Danielle. And Rangers are taking down Boston again this year, by the way. Just,
Ooh, I don't know.
just putting that out there.
I think Danielle was dating me there too, by the way. I said Twitter. I always forget to call it X.
No. We're not dating.
That was my first time I ever have noticed that.
I still call it Twitter. I refuse. Elon Musk, be damned. Okay, you're running into the ground. All right, no, refuse.
Exactly.
Absolutely refuse. All right. On that note, we'll see you guys next week. Everyone, have a great weekend. Hey there, I want to thank you for watching Operation Domination today. And if you're enjoying the show, there are some ways you can help support us. You can go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination and leave us a 5-star review. And you can do this on any podcast platform or on our YouTube page when you go to @FF Advice Network. This completely helps out the show be able to grow, and also leave us comments to let us know how we can curtail the show to you, because you are the most important member of the show. So again, go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination to leave a 5-star review and leave a comment wherever you listen or watch the show, and we'll help better serve you.